So my journey from high school, I graduated from Willow Ridge High School in Missouri City, Texas. Yeah. Graduated. And you know what? When I was graduating, my classmates, they were all going to UT, and at that time it was Southwest Texas State University. You guys may know it as Texas State University, but back then that's what it was called. Texas A&M, Texas Tech, all these big schools. And I remember my mother, she talked to me about attending an HBCU. And at the time, I wanted to go to Howard University, or I wanted to go to Grambling, and I was raised by a single mom, and my mother just couldn't afford, those out-of-state fees or any of that. So she said, why don't you apply to attend Prairie View A&M University? And I was like, okay, that's fine. And she told me, hey, if African-American kids and families and people don't support historically Black colleges and universities, who will? So this kind of motivated me, and I was like, okay. So I got accepted, and my freshman year, I was ready, and I attended Prairie View A&M University. And let me say this: when I graduated, a lot of my friends that attended those big schools that I named earlier, they kind of looked like, you going there? You what? That's the school you're going to? And I attended PVU with pride. I was proud. And PVU, we produce productive people. So ask me, where are those people today? So there you go. What I remember most about my time at Prairie View A&M University, or back then, we called it on the yard, on the hill, it was fun. It was fun. We had a good time. I remember I talked to you about my mom and attending Prairie View A&M University, and this is what she told me. Hey, if you don't like going to PVU your freshman year, then maybe we can see, I'll look at my budget and see if you want to transfer. Child, I didn't even come home the first year. I kicked it so hard. We had a good time. And I remember I did not know what I wanted to do when I got to school. I was 17. I graduated young because I attended grammar school and all that in Chicago. So the birthday was different. So when I moved to Houston, I was younger. So I was 17 when I graduated. But anyway, I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I talked to my mom, and I just went over to do what she did. My mother was a social worker. And I said, well, I'll be a social worker too. And I remember going over to the sociology building, and the dean said, the advisor, and they were like, this is not what you want to do. Why are you over here? I was like, because my mama. I wasn't one of those kids that had a plan. I didn't have it together when I walked into school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So he talked to me. He said, what do you like? And I said, music. What else do you like? I love listening to the radio. What else do you like? I like to talk. Go to the communications building. And that's where I went, to the communications building. And I learned about the different aspects of communications. Back then when I went to school, when I was at Prairie View, you learned about a lot of print. Newspapers was big. Journalism was big. And then you had broadcasting, radio, and TV. And the other part of communications, like working for a communications company, AT&T and MCI, these kind of companies that are not around anymore, those were the kind of companies, public relations, advertising. And I had no clue about how broad this major that I switched to was, and exposing me to this. So that was my first, I don't know, I guess I should say I got pushed, and go on your way, young grasshopper, and go learn about this field and this industry that you want to be in. And I stayed at the radio station. I stayed at the communications department, learning how to, and don't y'all laugh, but I learned how to cue up records and vinyl. That's what we was playing. Yes, actual vinyl records, a lot of jazz music at KPVU. We knew it wasn't a commercial radio station like, the radio stations that you all listen to, but back then I learned so much about radio and different departments and the exposure, and I just fell in love with my major in the field of broadcasting radio. What classes do I feel helped me for my career in radio? I will say this. At the beginning, when I was majoring in communications, I struggled a little bit with those specific major classes, learning all about communications. But I remember taking a voice and diction class. And one of the things that they taught us was stand in front of a mirror and talk and read newspaper articles. And, it taught us how to articulate and pronounce the pronunciation of words and speak clearly, and your posture. That was a very important class. And, you could be watching or listening to me and say, it's a speech class, but it's very important because voice and diction, no matter what field you choose to go in, you need to be able to communicate. Even if you want to be an influencer in social media, you need to be able to speak well. So that was the one class that I was like, it's all right. But later on in life, I was like, man, I am so grateful that I took that voice and diction class. And then also learning about broadcasting radio and the different departments, like I mentioned before, commercial radio, revenue, how radio stations make money. I didn't know any of these things because college radio is different, how the money is made and the income. So I learned a lot about speech, voice and diction, and the inner workings of how corporations, broadcast corporations, work. My first industry job experience, I applied for an internship while attending Prairie View A&M University, and that is very important. It was for a grade, but I didn't know that it allowed me to get an opportunity to really see hands-on what people did for a living, what different departments there was. So my first job, I was an intern, and one of the things that I had to do, we call these events in radio, like, when you listen to the radio and you hear your favorite radio station is going to be at a particular business, and, like a car dealership or a store or any of these locations on the weekend. So when I walked in during my internship, there was a big record store in Houston called Sound Warehouse. And all the big artists, hip hop artists, R&B artists, they all would come to Houston and they would go to Sound Warehouse on Main Street. So one of my very first assignments was I had to go to Sound Warehouse, hang up banners for Magic 102 for a meet and greet autograph party with Big Daddy Kane. Yes, I was like, I am the woman for the job now. Don't laugh, but back then when I was in Prairie View, yes, Big Daddy Kane. So I took my job seriously about hanging up these banners because I wanted Big Daddy Kane to see that this radio station is supporting him. And that early on, I didn't even know that's a part of marketing. That's a part of street teaming, all of these things, branding the radio station in front of not just Big Daddy Kane, but his fans and which were the radio station's listeners. Without any listeners, music is a product of radio station. That is their product. And without the music, there is no radio station. Commercials are revenue. That's how people get paid that work at a radio station when you hear the different commercials. So I know you're probably listening to the radio and you go, oh my gosh, so many commercials. That's how people that work in radio eat, to be honest with you. So that was my first promotions marketing job, if you will, internship. Yes, hanging up banners for Big Daddy Kane. Did you see the Versus battle with Big Daddy Kane, KRS-One? Legends. That's what I'm talking about. What lessons did I learn early in my career that kind of helped guide me to where I am today? I will say being patient helped me very early in my career. Staying, having humility, and always remember when you're first starting off, because I remember with my internship, I did a really good job, not just hanging banners for Big Daddy Kane. There were other assignments, and no task was too small for me because I wanted to get that job. So if I was asked to go get a cup of coffee for someone, for our manager in a meeting, I hopped up and went to go get that coffee. Now, you may be saying, I ain't getting coffee for nobody. You know, I'm a college student. But that was my way of knowing. You have to know that you cannot graduate from college and get a job and start at the top of the food chain. It just doesn't work like that. There's a journey, there's a process to this, and you have to put in the work. So you have to have humility, you have to be patient, and you have to understand that businesses change. And what I learned that is, if you are an expert in this country, if you are an expert at something, you know, you've heard the saying, jack of all trades, master of none. So if you are an expert at something and you work your way up, chances are your experience and your resume will allow you to demand the amount of pay, seniority, position, job title that you want based on your experience. What I also learned working in broadcast radio is that when I first graduated, I had to move a lot. You know, you had to climb the ladder to get to where you want. And in radio, we call that putting different call letters. What are call letters from the radio station? When you listen to a radio station and they say the beat or KBT, the call letters, that's what the radio station is. And you put on your resume where you've worked. And you put these call letters on there, and then you don't start at a big market like Houston. Houston is the 4th largest city in the country. So you have to understand that you can't graduate and get a degree and then just say, I'm gonna work in Houston in a big corporation. You might have to start small. You might have to go to a smaller city. We call them smaller markets, medium markets. What's a smaller market? You may have to go work in a, I don't know, Macon, Georgia. It could be smaller than that because that's kind of a bigger city. Or then you work your way up to like a New Orleans or Nashville. Those are cities that Memphis, we call medium-sized markets. And then you go to a major market, which would be, I mean, the #1 radio market in the world is New York. So those are your major markets. Your New York, Chicago, LA's, Houston. Those are, you know, Washington, D.C., Philly. Those are the major markets. So staying humble, being patient, and knowing that no task was too small as a start for you to work your way up. And here I am today. My current role, so what is my current job title? I am the program director for the Steve Harvey Morning Show, and I'm also the co-host. So what is a program director? Program director is my number one responsibility is being in charge of the license of the radio network. So what does that mean? That means that every day I put together the content, the information, the direction of the show. Yes, of course, Steve and everyone else on the show, they are the team and the cast members, and they know what they want to say and what they want to do. But I kind of lay it out for them and say, hey, this is what's going on in the world today. And then, you know, we all talk together and say, okay, this is funny, this is something serious, this is informative, we got to get this out. Like, for example, if we're going to tell people when to vote or when to register to vote, that may be a serious situation. If we want to talk about social justice issues, that is a serious situation. We may want to recap what did we do over the weekend. Okay, well, that can be a joke. So we try to balance out the information and entertain people in the morning when they're going to work or when they're going to school. So that is part of my job responsibility. But with all that, laying it all out, when I said my job is to protect the license, to make sure that everything we're saying, everything we're doing in the direction that we're going in, we're following all of the rules. And there are a lot of rules for companies. There's a lot of rules from the federal government, which can and which cannot say, and You just have to make sure that all your I's are dotted and all your T's are crossed. What does a typical day look like for me? My alarm clock goes off at 3 a.m. Boom. And no, I cannot press the snooze. I cannot look at my phone and slide that alarm off, because the number one fear working morning radio, you all may be wanting to work morning news, morning TV. That biggest fear is you wake up and you see that sun. And if you see that it's daylight, you have overslept. So my job is to get up at 3 a.m. to prepare, to help prepare the show, to get ready, to entertain you all every single morning. So after we finish, 3 a.m., I write out the show, pull the segments together, figure out what we're going to do. We go on air, and, when we get ready to go on air, we as personalities, as on-air personalities, we have to let go of whatever personal issues that we have. Because no one wants to turn on the radio and hear, woe is me, because people that are listening got their own problems. So our job is what we call, when you push that studio door open, and that's in TV too. When you push those doors open, you leave your problems at the door. And that's hard to do sometimes, but you have to do it for the amount of time of your on-air shift, or the time that you're on air, or the time that you're on television, and do your job. Do your job. Entertain, inform, be topical, be present. And when you get through, when you turn off when that off-air mic goes off, then you could cry, and then you could deal with what you have to deal with. And that sometimes is around 10 a.m. And then we kind of talk about maybe what we want to do tomorrow. And then we cut some production. And what is that? Well, we voice things that say, tune in tomorrow and we're going to talk about da-da-da-da-da. So it's called post-production. And that's pretty much it. I would say the downside to that is working every day of the week. You get up at that time, you constantly think about, I got to go to bed to get up, to go to work, to go to bed, to get up, to go to work. But hey, I get up to go to work, and that's the blessing. I have a job, so. What hard skills does one need to have to be in the radio industry? I think that what people don't realize is you have to be what we call on point. You have to pay attention to everything. So in radio, your job is, you kind of feel like you're working all the time, because you have to watch the news. You have to look at social media. You have to see what's trending. You have to look at the charts. You have to listen to radio. You have to know who the artists are, who the upcoming artists are, who the new artists are. And by artists, I mean, who's the hottest rapper, who's the hottest singer, whatever format you want to work. You can work in country music. You still need to know that. You may want to work what we call general or pop music. You still need to know, you may not be a fan, and that's the other thing you need to remember. You may not be a fan of these artists and music, but it's your job to know, to be informed, to know when the album is dropping. With radio, you can't just say, well, I'm off the air and my job is done. No, you're constantly what we call prepping, and you're constantly knowing. And I'm not saying you have to know every single thing, but whatever format and whatever radio station you choose to work with, be aware, be familiar. You don't want to sit in a meeting, or you as a music director, which is a person where a record representative from Epic Records, Def Jam, Interscope, any of these record labels could come in and say, hey, can you play the new Megan Thee Stallion? Well, you may be sitting there saying, who's Megan Thee Stallion? What? You know what I'm saying? So you have to be up on game. And you have to always constantly, and that could be a little tiring. Some people may want jobs where they just want to turn it off when it's off. But in broadcasting, we call it massaging. You're constantly spinning your wheels, and you may need to take a break. Sometimes you have to put down your phone and turn off the radio and turn off the TV. I'll tell you one thing that everybody walks around with AirPods and your headphones, and that's your time. Well, for me, because I have headphones on all the time, and what I do for a living, listening and editing and talking on the mic, there are times where I don't want anything. I don't want any noise in my ear. I don't want AirPods. I just want complete silence. And that could be my age too, but it's part of my job. But that would be some of the things I would say that you'd be surprised that, like you got to constantly do stuff. Absolutely. What professional challenges have I endured and how did I overcome them? Well, I'll tell you, being a Black woman and I am an executive manager. I am probably one of maybe 2 or 3 Black women in this country that are in charge of a syndicated morning radio show nationally. Our show is broadcasted over 100. We call them affiliates. That's just another word of saying radio stations. And I would say the challenge with that, climbing, the corporate ladder, I think, that's a challenge for any minority, in any field, in upper management, But I am fortunate that I work for a company that recognizes diversity and feel and lead. The company I work for, they lead by example, and they don't just talk it, they walk the talk, and they want to make sure that they have women of color in management, making decisions about things that come out the speakers of the radio to women that look like me, to men that look like me, that have the same skin color, that kids, because one thing you have to remember about us as a people, we are trendsetters. We dictate a lot of what's going on. And when I say we are trendsetters, we tell you what kind of sneakers to wear, what kind of clothes to wear, what brand of liquor to drink, what brand of makeup to wear, what type of jewelry to wear. I mean, you look at Jay-Z and Beyonce doing the Tiffany jewelry commercial. We lead the trend in everything. And we have to remind big corporations and advertisers how powerful we are as a people. Because if we don't say it's cool as a race, it ain't cool. So we have to make sure that companies recognize our power, our buying dollars, and when we have issues, when there are social injustices, when there are things that are going on that matter to us, they need to stop and listen and pay attention, because representation matters. We need to turn on the TV and see a commercial with, I'll just say a Sprite commercial with LeBron James. Because how many of y'all love Sprite? I do. I love Sprite. So Black people drink Sprite. That's just an example of what has to constantly be reminded. And it's the same in any industry, but in radio, because radio and broadcasting, it's music, it's fun, it's lifestyle. And that's what we say hip hop is a lifestyle. It's not just a form of music. It's a part of everything. So that is a challenge. But it's not impossible. It's a constant everyday thing that you have to do. It's a message, if you will, that you have to consistently tell and remind powers that be that this is constant and ongoing. What should a current student in college now be doing to prepare for a career in broadcasting and radio? First thing you need to do is communicate. Communicate with your advisors, with your professors. Let them know what you're interested in and what you want to do. Do your research. Call a radio station. See if you can volunteer or do an early internship to get in the door so you can learn about the different departments. Also, if you're too young for that right now, let's say you're a freshman or a sophomore, you need to be applying yourself. Don't wait till the last minute to do your work. And I know you're like, yeah, that's what my mom says, or that's what my parents say, or whatever. But that puts you on the track of working ahead and planning ahead and getting that time and freedom that you want to explore other avenues or get exposed to other avenues. And you can't do it if you gotta constantly catch up with your assignments and not getting your work done and making sure that you stay enrolled in campus. So your education, nobody can take that away from you. And your education is a tool, it's a resource. It says when you graduate to these corporations that you are trainable. You are trainable to learn these jobs. Nobody expects you to know the inner workings of where you want to work, but your college degree shows them that I can be trained, that I can learn. Give me an opportunity to do this. So constantly prepare yourself. Get your brand. This is a big word now, brand. That wasn't a word when I was in college. When you thought of brand, you thought of famous people and celebrities. Everybody has a brand. You don't have to be famous to have a brand. So work on your brand. Work on you being the best you can be. And that will help you for sure. What do I attribute the longevity and the success that I've had in this industry? I am a hard worker. I work a lot. And I know there's a lot of hard workers out there, but it's hard work. It's teamwork. We all work together to have this common goal to win. And no matter where I've worked, and I've worked in a lot of cities. I've worked in Chicago, I've worked in New Orleans, I've worked in New York. All of these places that I've learned, I've helped lead these radio stations to ratings, to winning big. And that is because I understood, we hear this a lot. She understood the assignment. We hear that on TikTok. I understood the assignment of my job to help with my knowledge and my experience to help win, to help the company win as a team. Because if the station is not winning, guess what? That means they're going to have to start letting people go. And they're going to have to downsize because the money, in radio, there's a saying, you are your numbers. And that means you are your revenue and you are your ratings. And without those two together, you're in trouble. So working together, being a hard worker, being consistent, not having an attitude, not having this somebody owes me something. I worked hard for where I am and I earned it. And I earned the respect that I have at my title and my name. And I take that very seriously, and I won't allow anyone to try to damage my reputation or put me in situations on my job that will, not have a good look, if you will. So stay on the straight and narrow. Just the same policies or the same tips that I gave you about how to win currently in college, you carry that with you in the professional world. I think I want my legacy to be that, I always say I'm a hard worker because everybody says, Carla, you work so hard. And I do. I'm a hard worker. I have a daughter. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I'm married. I've been married for 17 years. And my family is my world. And, you can start off in life when you graduate from college and you grind and you hustle and you got a plan. But one thing the pandemic and COVID has taught us is that if you don't have family, you're doing it all for nothing. And you can have these fantastic jobs and all that, but at the end of the day, you don't want to just get up to go to work to just get a check. You want your legacy, you want your work, you want it to mean something. So I get up, like I said at the very beginning of the presentation, what's a day like for me? I get up at 3 o'clock to 3:30 a.m. and I get up for my family because my husband and I, we have a union and we have a pack. And what's that pack? We trying to build an empire as a family. We trying to, hey, secure the bag, as we say, stack these checks and have a future for when we retire, have a college money for our daughter. So I want my daughter to look back like I look back at my mother. My mother didn't have a high-paying executive job or the glamorous type job that I had. She helped people. She was a social worker and she was good at it. And people really, really loved my mom. My mom is deceased, but I saw her work really, really hard. And she always went to work. People was like, oh, I know your mom's at work. And I'm like, she always went to work. That was her thing. Go to work, do your job, do what you say you're going to do. And that was part of my legacy. I get up every day and say, if you can't, go to work. I mean, I'm talking, obviously, but do what you say you're going to do. Let your legacy be that when you go somewhere else, let's say if you have to leave your job or whatever, and they look at your resume or they talk to your references and past supervisors, they all say, wow, this person, she was fantastic. I've been working at the same broadcast company since 2 years out of graduating from Prairie View A&M University. That's seniority. That is a future. I built a future in this company, but I paid my dues. No one gave me anything. I worked hard and I earned it. So I think that's it,